Hey, everybody, welcome back. HSC Podcast number 15. Getting deep in the podcast here. As always, on the moderating Big Box Steve and co-host the Big Smooth Derek. So we've had a lot of sports, which I know there's some of the people watching like sports, and then we've had some of the political stuff and a lot of stuff happening in the current events and things like that, which can get a little intense for some people. So pretty excited for tonight's podcast, just to talk about, kind of a lighter side of things. We're going to kind of focus on movies and entertainment. I mean, who does? Well, I mean, obviously there's people out there that don't like everything these days, want to cancel everything, but movies are a great thing. I think it's a positive for most people. I love watching movies. And so before we get into the meat of the topic, I kind of want to just talk about movies in general. Both of us are big movie buffs. We've been watching movies our whole life. And now when we think about it, as we brought this topic up, and for everybody listening to the topic tonight, we're going to specifically talk about some 80s movies, but just 80s movies in general, just thinking about that and thinking about, man, this is 40 years ago now, right? So how does that make you feel?
It's real old.
I mean, didn't that just hit differently when you start looking at there, and then you're like, oh yeah, 82. Wait a minute, it's 2022, and a lot of, I mean, those movies, even when they're made in 82, obviously we're really young, but we still watched them, when, a few years later, because back then it was like you movies weren't as readily available coming out. You watch the older movies that had been out for a few years. Now you watch them, the minute they come out. So different back then, the movie was done in the early 80s. We were still watching it in the late 80s, early 90s.
And I don't know about you, but I think I was watching like rated R movies when I was like 7.
Yeah, it was good parenting there for both sides, right? I barely let Brooklyn off YouTube Kids, and it's like I was watching Friday the 13th when I was like 7 years old, looking behind the door in my closet, or looking around the house before I go to bed, like, where's Jason?
Well, that's because back then those movies were like PG-13.
Yeah, comparatively, I guess, when you think about it,
It's like now, nothing compared. I think wasn't Jaws like PG-13?
Right. Yeah,
that'd be rated R now.
Of course, a different rating system, right? So talking about that a little, because I do want to talk about that before we get into the main topic, is how movies have changed, comparatively, but also, for the good and for the bad. Like, in your perspective, you think about movies, say in the last 5-10 years tops, not going back too far, let's just say very recent stuff. How good are the movies compared to those previous decades? Which decade is really the best as far as the movies, and why? That's kind of what I want to dig into a little bit before we get into the main topic.
Well, it's really tough, because when we were growing up, I remember like when we were in high school and stuff, you would just go to like Hollywood Video or Blockbuster, and you could just walk around for like an hour. And
hours.
Yes. And then just pick up something you never even, would have thought about watching. And then we're like, whoa, this is a great movie. I feel like nowadays, all independent movies are pretty much gone. You don't have the independent, it's like you couldn't have a Kevin Smith nowadays.
A lot harder for sure. Well, they're out there, they're just not mainstreamed, right? They're harder to find.
Right. And I mean, I do love what they have done with the superhero movies, because they're heads and above better than what they were in the 80s and everything like that. I'm going to get in trouble with some people, but not the DC movies. They suck. But the Marvel movies, those have been well planned out, thorough, and gone through. And it's cool because when we were kids, you read all the comics and stuff, but you never had those movies come out, or they were like really bad, or you had like the Lou Ferrigno Incredible Hulk TV show, and then or like the Spider-Man, from the 70s. So I do enjoy that. The whole thing about, I can stay at home and watch a movie is great. But I just kind of feel like we don't have as many options as we used to have.
Yeah, I think it's when even you look on like say Netflix or Amazon Prime and stuff, a lot of what you're looking at are older movies. There are some of the newer movies that come out, obviously, that are on there, but a big part of the movie collection is stuff that's collected over years and years and years. And so think about something like Batman, for example, though. The original Batman, Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson. I mean, that's a great movie.
Yes.
Right. And then you've got newer Batmans, which they have a fundamental advantage of graphics and CGI and all these things they can do to make the movie better. So when you talk about some of these superhero movies, that is something I think about when I watch them. Like, Batman, I think the original well, not the original. I mean, the first Batman we knew, they did a great job with that movie with limited, what I would call, resources comparatively to what they have nowadays. Right.
Well, yeah, and they had a great director, and I think that helped out a lot. And that he got the tone. Now we're talking in what, like 88, 89, I think Batman came out. And you got the tone of Batman before, Joel Schumacher ruined it by making it all fluorescent and putting everything in fluorescence, and like it lost that darker tone. Whereas the Michael Keaton, you never saw like a superhero movie that was kind of dark.
Right. Yeah. And I think they did a good job, characterizing their, where they really grasped the characters they were playing. I think, Jack Nicholson was amazing as the Joker, did a really good job of making that movie even better than, as it was written script wise. I think he upped that.
I feel like it's just recency bias. And I think people don't realize, just because it's a newer movie with better graphics and everything, or it can be darker, like Heath Ledger's Joker, it doesn't always mean it was better. Because what Tim Burton did with Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson in 89 was pretty amazing. And granted, like Heath Ledger's Joker was good, but it's also, he had more leeway to make him that way. I just between the Michael Keaton and then the Christian Bale, I kind of feel like those are the Batmans.
Yeah, I think Christian Bale did a good job as well. I like him as a Batman. Obviously, I still think Michael Keaton's the best to me, but it's kind of the same thing when I look at Superman too. I love the original Supermans.
Yes.
They were horrible as far as like graphics and stuff, and the doing that, some of that stuff, like when you had to shoot lasers out of his eyes and things like that. You're like, now you look at that and you're like, what? But back then it was cool. But also it's like there's a part of how the actors embrace the roles. Like Christopher Reeve to me is Superman, and he always will be Superman in my eyes. And it's not because he did it first, it's because he did such a good job of playing that duality of Clark Kent and Superman. Like he really stepped out of each role and into each, role there to really make that a feel of what Superman is at the heart, of the two characters.
Yes, the Superman 1 and 2 are up there as the best superhero movies, I think. I'm not really a fan of the newer Superman movies. Maybe it's just 1 and 2, and especially Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, which because he got fired from the movie after he'd made most of it, and his cut is amazing. And the funny thing about Superman is it got bought out by Canon Pictures, which was a horrible picture company. And that's why you had that horrible Superman 4 Quest for Peace with all the bad graphics, because they cut so many corners. And yeah, it was just a really bad, it kind of took superhero movies. I mean, look, it took how many years? So we got another Superman after that.
Yeah. I don't think there was really much attraction, especially to that Superman role. And I was reading something. They were talking about when you're talking about action scenes and graphics and CGI and now versus how they had to set that stuff up, maybe like in the 80s, even early 90s, mid 90s, stuff like that, to where it was like they had to really do it, like it was like this one take, you're gonna blow something up, or you're gonna crumble a building, or you're gonna do this, and like, so you had to do it perfectly, but it was real graphics. And I think there was something about that, and because that really stuck with me. I was like, yeah, there is something when I watched that and you're like, wow, that looked really real. Where sometimes I watch movies nowadays and you're like, it's just obviously computer generated, and it almost takes a little bit away from me unless it's done really well.
Right. Yeah, me and Caitlin were watching Death on the Nile, and they're in Egypt. And you could totally tell it's like a green screen Egypt. Right. Like, it's so bad. And it's a movie from right now, and it's like so bad.
Yeah.
You totally tell it's like not real.
Yeah, and it just ruins the experience a little bit, comparatively, right? Like, if you didn't have anything to compare against, I guess it'd be okay. But you have some of these movies, that were made previously that they shot on location, like I said, they had to build these sets, they had to, set up these stunts and these scenes, without being able to have any stuff like they do today. So, how about let's talk about like acting in general, because there's some great actors still, right? I mean, there's still some people who do great acting job. Is it, how's the acting, how's the script writing, because this plays a big part when you're watching movies too, right? I mean, that makes a big difference. So how do you feel about today's acting, script writing, comparatively over the last 50 years or so?
I don't know. It's hard to, I don't want to be like the old man, but like the movies I picked, most of them, all the dialogue is really good and it just fits well together. I mean, maybe it's just because I haven't watched as, maybe it's because of the pandemic and we haven't had the last few years anything really like out there that is like amazing, like, oh, I want to go see this movie, unless it's the big budget movies.
Right.
It's hard because, when we were younger, you had to go to the movie theater for anything. Now it's like, it's so expensive to go.
Well, that, just wait.
Yeah. It's like the only thing you want to go to the movie theater for is something with special effects, because that's what the whole movie theater experience is for. You're not going to go see a lot of romantic comedies or anything like that, or period pieces that are not something, you could just watch it at home now because your TVs are just as good and you have a sound system, and it doesn't cost like $10-12 just to get in, and then like $8 for popcorn, and
right.
And you don't have those, like, I remember having the Village Theater was a 99-cent double feature, and it was kind of like we have here the Mount Hood Theater, but Mount Hood has now become more or newer show movies, but it used to be like second run. And that was nice. But now it's like, and I get it. The movie theaters are kind of dying off because everyone could just watch it at home now.
That's the only way they can survive. They have to play the newer stuff. They have to charge a lot for it. Otherwise they'll end up closing their doors for sure. Right. So one of the things as I was thinking about that, and I was reading a couple articles on that, I think the acting is still there. I think there's a lot of good actors and actresses still that do well at capturing their roles and can really play the part. To me, I think where it's falling apart is in the writing, and in the scripts. I think scripts are written in a different way. They're kind of taken from a different method. Obviously, you have a lot of remakes, remaking ideas, and that's kind of unavoidable, so to some point. But there's still a lot of this. It's almost to me like shortcut script writing, where instead of bringing in a story, they're just outlining events. and putting them together. So some of these movies to me that I see nowadays, it's not all telling like a story. Like the new Dune, for example. Yeah, it's a remake, but it's really well done. It's really well written, really well acting, because it's based on a good story, books, and previous movies, and all that put into that. But then it's encapsulated really well in that, where some of the movies that are some of the fresher stuff or newer stuff, not necessarily remakes, I feel like they're kind of shortcutting the scripts a little bit, and that's affecting the quality of the movie, even when they have good actors and actresses playing in the roles. So that's something that I've noticed recently. And there's always an issue with quality of acting. Like, you can look at a lot of movies and say, man, that's not such good acting, that they did there. So you could definitely see that across the board, but I think it's more so these days. So in general, a lot of years of movies. What do you think? I think the best decade, and that's our topic tonight, is the 80s. As I think about all the different decades from here, previously, you go, 2010, 2000, 1990s, 1980s, 70s. I don't go back too much farther than that, but there were some good older movies, but there just wasn't the volume. I think 80s had the volume, had some great movies. To me, best decade out there movies wise. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to count down the top 5 movies that we think in the 80s. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but man, this is a tough chore. I mean, there's over 200 quality movies in the 80s that you could say are decent to good. A lot of great ones. So this was a tough chore to try to get these out. And yeah, we might have been able to do this by genre because there's so many good movies in there. But we're just gonna start here with top 5. Let's count them down. So we'll each do our number 5 and our number 4, number 3, and just kind of why do you think that movie fits in there? So number 5 for you. What do you got on 5 on your list?
Well, number 5, it's more because it's like a nostalgia piece, and it's for kids, and it's in our area, going the classic from 1985, The Goonies.
Nice. Yeah, that was it. So yeah, why you put the Goonies in there? Now this is top 5, right, of the 80s. So what makes the Goonies into the top 5? How do they get in there?
Because Goonies it's like the whole storyline of it's the rich against the poor. They're going to lose their house, everything, and the whole adventure. You have pirates, you have pirate treasure, you have the adventure, you have
The
sloth,
love story.
you have you got data, you got all this. And when we grew up, 85, we were 7 years old. Perfect time for us to watch that movie, and it was just encapsulating and then of course it's just hour and a half away, and it just, as a kid, that's like a story that is just amazing to you, and as an adult, people still love it.
Yeah, I think it's a feel good movie, right? It's got all the elements that you're talking about: action, adventure, love story. I mean, not a classic love story, but you got his older brother and this cheerleader, and then Mouth and the friend, and so you got that little romance parts in there. But yeah, that adventure part, and Goonies, it's a classic. It's a great movie. Again, there's so many good movies there. I definitely see that it could be in the top 5, and you gotta love it. It's just a great movie. So great story. That's one of the ones I was talking about, where you could probably look at parts of that and be like, yeah, the acting's not that great in parts, but again, it's a great story. Yeah, it's a great story, and that, to me, you're not going in there to see them deliver Oscar performances. So good. Number 5, Goonies. So my number 5 will probably surprise you a little bit. That it's my number 5, and my number 5 is Die Hard. And I love Die Hard, right? I'm a Die Hard guy. It's one of those series where the most recent ones aren't as good as the first things, but it's a good series overall. And Die Hard's the original, and it's John McClane. He's out there, and you got the action, you got the hero, you got the saving the hostages and beating the bad guys, and he's got times where it's funny and times where it's intense, and it's some of those times where he plays that really good role of that like hard-headed husband, and you're always like, John, why are you always doing the wrong thing, but yet you can kill 72 terrorists, it's like, so I love the movie, right? And but there is a layer of it when you really think about it, and that it's just kind of that shoot 'em up, can one guy really kill all these hired terrorists? This is one New York cop's going to take down these guys that are military trained and better weapons and everything. And so there's a little part of that, but I think Bruce Willis just does a great job in all the movies, but particularly in this one, really shining in the movie. So it does come in at a top 5 movie when you're talking about all-time 80 movies. It could go higher for me, but when I just think about overall, I think 5 is a good spot. So I think 2 surprises there. I'm actually surprised you had Goonies in the top 5, but I think that's a good surprise. And I kind of surprised myself that I didn't have Die Hard a little higher, because it is one of my all-time favorite movies. But again, there's some elements of it that I think that put it in the top 5, but not as high as it could be. So let's keep moving. So number 4, what do you got at 4?
Number 4 is my top romantic comedy or romantic dramedy for the 80s. It's from 1989. It is Say Anything.
Oh, man, such a good movie. So how does that one get in there? So what makes Say Anything great?
Oh, I love the whole, well, first off, I'm a huge John Cusack fan. He's amazing. It's directed by Cameron Crowe, written by Cameron Crowe. It's in the Seattle area, so it's right before Seattle grunge, but they still have the Seattle flavor of music in there. John Cusack's character of Lloyd Dobler is the classic underdog, underachiever that goes after the number one girl in school. And it's not even, what I like also is she's not a cheerleader or anything like that. She's smart, but she's very popular for being smart. So that's kind of a cool thing about that, is she wasn't like the typical, oh, I need to get the cheerleader. That the writing is so good in this, and the acting is so good. There's so many great scenes.
Well, everybody knows the ghetto blaster,
the boombox, yes.
The boombox.
And then this quote is it was named in the top 100 quotes of all time for movies. I gave her my heart and she gave me a pin.
Right.
And so, yes, I totally for Say Anything. Lloyd Dobler, the underdog who gets the girl.
Yeah. So, Cusack, you're right. When this movie was done and the people in this movie, the acting was stellar. Cusack is one of those guys who's always been a good actor, even at a young age. And he never lost it. He's always been good throughout his whole career. But I think what surprised me about this particular movie is how well he does in this movie, and I think that makes the movie. There's a lot of times where, there's a lot of the supporting cast that they do a good job and things like that. But I think Cusack really makes that movie, and it is a classic, and I love that movie. So great movie there as well. So, and it's going to be hard not to have a great movie, but then it's like, what did you leave out to put in Say Anything, right? And that now I'm running into the same issue, because my number 4 is one that I know you enjoy too, which is 1983 Trading Places. So you got Eddie Murphy, Dan Aykroyd, in this just great story of, these rich guys in a stock, trading company, and they're willing to ruin people's lives for no, you found a bet of the $1. And it kind of just reminds you of corporate greed and things that are like makes you really, I feel it now more than I did back then. Now that when I watch that movie and think about that movie, you're just like, man, that's just the way it is, and these guys don't care about us at all. But when you talk about, Don Amici and Ralph Bellamy, both they play those roles of the brothers so good, Randolph and Mortimer. And then what I really love about the movie is how well Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy adapted to the roles, even though those might not be far outside of what they're capable of. They really dug into those roles, were able to just encapsulate those characters to a T. Like I don't think you could have put two people in that role. You couldn't have put two different people in there, and they played that as well as those two did. And then of course Jamie Lee Curtis, does a great job in supporting role there. And so it's a great movie, well written, well acted, and just turns out to be, obviously that heartfelt ending, where the good guys win and the big rich guys go broke, and it's a must watch, and a movie I watched so many times I can't even count, but it's got to be in my top 5. So we got Trading Places at number 4.
Well, and then we did a high school
Oh yeah,
project on it. We had acted it out with Star Wars figures.
Oh yeah, that was great, man. That was the original movie debuts, and it wasn't as good as the Cops episode.
Yeah,
but that was a better one. But man, that was fun. Yeah, that was great. So we got so far I've got Die Hard, Trading Places, you got Goonies, and Say Anything. So what's number 3?
Well, number 3, and Trading Places, that's a really good one, but like you said, it's so hard with just 5 movies. And number 3 is a repeat. I'm going Die Hard, but I'm going to say it's almost the perfect movie because you have it all in that movie. You have the comedy, you have the action, the screenwriting, like they all the actors feed off of each other. And the biggest part is Alan Rickman, Hans Gruber, is one of the greatest villains of all time.
Yeah. And Rickman does a great job in that movie, and it makes the movie even better than it already is. He raises that movie up to a level of top 5 for sure. So 3, well, how does it get into 3? What keeps it from being 1? So what are some downfalls then to Die Hard?
Well, I said it was almost the perfect movie.
That's what I mean.
Number one is the perfect movie.
Okay, but so what is it about Die Hard that is not quite perfect then? So for people watching and listening, what should they know?
Well, it's hard because it's so close. It's just not compared to number 1 is just better. Die Hard is amazing to me. You even got William Atherton. He plays such a great secondary villain, but slimy guy. Reginald Bell Johnson does a great job. The Johnson and Johnson. Oh, and we can't forget the most important character, the one that had all the greatest lines. We need to have some more FBI guys.
Right.
There's glass everywhere.
Glass. And same guy that plays in God, what's his name?
Breakfast Club.
Breakfast Club. Yeah. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But yeah, he's great.
Paul Gleason.
Yeah, Paul Gleason. Paul Gleason. He's great in the movie. So just to we'll get into this in a later podcast, but you may not like this, but I don't. Die Hard 1 is not my favorite Die Hard.
Yeah, yours is vengeance.
Yeah, I mean, because Sam Jackson brings something to that movie that the because honestly, you've got what's his name playing the villain, Gruber's brother. He's his brother in the movie,
Jeremy Irons.
Jeremy Irons, and he does a great job. He really plays a great villain. Maybe not quite as good as Rickman, but very close. But Sam Jackson adds an element to that movie that brings the movie to I think the top level. And then I think the storyline in that one, even though the storyline in Die Hard's great too, but that whole idea of how they play out that storyline in Die Hard 3 with the having to figure out the different tricks or traps or whatever you want to call them. But and I agree. Like I said, Die Hard for me still a top 5 movie. Obviously, I got him at 5. You got it at 3. So good. Die Hard with a good showing. So my number 3, and this is a sometimes forgotten classic. What's it? 86, I think. Stand By Me. You're talking about local, right? It's local and filmed in Oregon, but the reason I love Stand By Me, and I think it deserves to be in the top 5, and even I got it above a couple of those other great movies, is because the story is not just a great story, written by Stephen King, but you get Dreyfuss telling the story while you get to watch the story, and it's so well done, the way that he overlays to you getting to watch the movie and hear the story, and it told from a different voice, and then you get to see them go through it. And those kids did such a good job. They're all really good. Unfortunately, River Phoenix, didn't get to keep going, but you got, Jerry O'Connell and, Will Wheaton and Corey Feldman just playing great parts. I think they do a good job in the roles that they have of showing like these different lifestyles that the kids have, and they play into those, parts of coming from different upbringings, having different parents that treat them differently. But then the whole story, and then you got this great bad guy in Kiefer Sutherland, who's kind of, he's not like a typical bad guy, but he is the antagonist, and he just does a great job being Ace. And I think it just like how Will Wheaton's character progresses throughout the movie, and you really feel that, and you feel him like growing into that role. And then obviously the storyline's just great, and it's just a fun movie to watch, but it's also like kind of heart-wrenching in times, but it's really intense as well. And for me, Stand By Me is a classic, and I love it.
And John Cusack is in that.
Right. He's in so many movies, though. He's but yeah, I mean, there's so many good actors in the movie, and they all do a great job, even as younger kids, and which I think that comparatively to say like the Goonies, which there were some good young actors in that too, really good. The acting to me in Stand By Me was top notch.
Right. Well, I mean, Goonies didn't have a River Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was a phenomenal actor.
Yep.
Yeah, both of them had Corey Feldman.
Right.
I love, that's a good one. Stand By Me was one that I was thinking of, but I went with Goonies. Those were like kind of my two. The other good thing about, Stand By Me is you think about it, we're like Richard Dreyfuss now.
Right.
And so it's like, you kind of like, if you rewatch that now, then you kind of think about your own childhood and what stuff you did. Unfortunately, fortunately, I guess nothing compared to going to find a dead body, but
right. Yeah. It wasn't anything like that, but it's still, it's a great, like I said, that telling of the story and the reflection and having the story happen. I think it was very unique the way it happened, which made it such a great movie, in that sense as well. So, yeah. All right. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty, right? So recap before we go down. So you got, so what are your top 5 so far? You got
Goonies, Say Anything, and Die Hard.
Die Hard. So what gets ahead of those? What hits number 2? Oh, I knew it. I knew it was coming. I figured you'd have that in there, just from the that question you asked before, but and it's Star Wars, right? So
Well, the
well,
1980 Empire Strikes
Strikes
Back.
right? So how good is it compared to the rest of Star Wars? Let's just talk about those three, right? How good is it compared to those? What makes it the top two, number two movie of the 80s? Like, so give us the breakdown.
Well, how does it compare to the other two original trilogy movies? Or
Yeah. So that's just my question, but I want to hear why you put it there. But I also was curious how you think it compares to those two.
Well, I will say, because we're talking 80s though, because the original movie came out in 77.
Right.
I like that one a lot too. The thing about Empire is, it's just so dark. It's like The Godfather Part 2. It's like the second movie of a trilogy where it doesn't have a happy ending.
Right.
But it doesn't have a happy ending, but it also, you can see, well, they're going to come back. It sets everything up. You have the introduction of Yoda. It's the first movie with Yoda.
That's right.
And then before, George Lucas did all his other stuff, it was the introduction of Boba Fett, who is more of a badass than Boba Fett for appearing for like 5 minutes in a movie, right?
Yeah.
He, like, forever, and everyone still talks about how awesome Boba Fett is, and he didn't really do anything, but he was just so cool looking. Yeah, you have the whole Luke training with Yoda, the beginning at Hoth.
Yeah.
With the AT-ATs coming out, and
it's my favorite Star Wars scene of all movies is that scene. Is beginning of Empire.
Yeah, I mean, I so many times when I would be like, we had like huge snow days or something, but I'd walk over to Stefan's house and I'd walk like I'm in Hoth or something, and I'm like Han Solo. I'm like, oh, I'm getting so tired walking through all this snow, and that's like the first thing I would think of is like, I'm on Hoth.
Yeah.
And it's like you had Luke against Darth Vader, and then you have the real, like, the spoiler alert if you haven't seen this yet, but the whole Vader's Luke's father and all this stuff. And it's like, it's, for me, like, I think of my childhood, it is Star Wars, and I watched Star Wars so much, and Empire is the best of them all.
Okay, so if you think of that trilogy, the first three, right? The Star Wars, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. Empire's number one of those three.
Empire's 1, Star Wars is 1A. They're so close.
They are really close.
Just because the first one it's new, and you have the final Death Star bat, and all that. Empire, though, Yoda.
Yeah. Well, and there's Empire, even though it's not the same spectacular ending that Star Wars has, where Luke's going through the trench and gonna blow up the Death Star with an incredible missile shot that he makes blind, because who needs the computer, that. But when you think about the ending of Empire, I just love how you do have the fight between them, with Luke and Vader, and and you've got the whole Cloud City scenario happening. And I'm also a big fan of
Lando
Calrissian, like, yeah, so big fan of Lando. Billy D. Williams thinks he does a great job playing that role, so introducing him in there. So yeah, great movie, start to finish. That's a tough one. Those two are so close. I don't know that I could pick one of those to be better than the other. I think they're both very good. Jedi, I would definitely put after them, even though I think it's a good movie. I think those two still are a little bit above.
Yeah, it's maybe nostalgia, but those three are still the best three out of all. It's like 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, no, and a lot. I think of the newer ones, the Phantom Menace, it gets a lot of bad flack, and I don't think it's as bad as some of the diehards make it out to be, yeah, there's things I could do without in the movie, but overall the movie's still good. I mean, there's some great things about that movie. And even the second and the third, like, I have no problem sitting down watching them all. I think they're just fine. They're obviously not as good as the first three for me, but I like them. So somehow I knew that was coming. And it's really hard to leave that out. So I'll spoiler you that it's not in my top 5. So my number 2 is Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it's kind of funny, because you got Han Solo in Star Wars, and he's rolling out of that into Indiana Jones, and I think he's becoming such a great actor at that time, and the way he plays the Indiana Jones role is, for me, top notch. I don't know that anybody plays a better role than him playing Indiana Jones. He just plays it perfectly, and on top of that, it's just a great, well-written movie. As far as the script's great, the screenplay is great, the storyline is great, and it's just fun to watch. And it's a new type of thing you were seeing with this archaeologist type / adventurer guy. You got the finding of these valuables, and you got Nazis in there, and you got the Ark. Like it just is a great movie. It's well done on all sides. And it's just something that I could never get tired of watching. Anytime Raiders of the Lost Ark comes on, I'm there. And it's a hard one, because there's a lot of Indiana Joneses. I think there's a lot of them that are good, so it's a good series. And there's a lot of other movies I could put in there. But for me, the reason this is so high on my list is because of how well Harrison Ford plays Indiana Jones.
And see, well, funny, when we were doing these lists, Caitlin's like, I was like, well, there's going to be this, and she's like, an Indiana Jones, and then and I'm like, well, because I didn't want to do all the same movies like we talked about, so I left Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark off. I'm like you though, with when you talked about Die Hard with a Vengeance being better than Die Hard.
Well, Last Crusade, right?
Yes,
Last Crusade. You already know. I mean, because it's equal. It's as good a movie, but that's one of these things for me. Like, it's an original thing, and it's the same thing with Sam Jackson, right? And Die Hard 3, Sean Connery in Last Crusade. He brings the movie to a different level that you just can't get without him, and that's what makes Crusade such a great movie, right? And so
for you, 2 of your top 5 have the great Denholm Elliott in them.
Yeah. He's a great, he plays that great extra role, like he's kind of like Indiana Jones backup, and he's the butler and Trading Places, and it's like he plays, that's his role. He's just great there. So all right, so as we circle down here, so we've got Goonies, we've got Say Anything, we've got, what was number 3 for you?
Die Hard.
Die Hard, and then Empire. So number 1.
Do we want to try guessing what our number 1s are, or?
Man, at this point with your list, I don't even know what your number 1 could be. Like, you've kind of thrown me for a little bit of loop.
I go all over the place.
I know, and so I don't even know that I have a good guess here.
I'm going to guess yours is Lethal Weapon.
That's a good guess. Man, I don't know, and I have a feeling it might be the same as mine, or it could be the same as mine, so I'm not going to guess that. I mean, it could be Real Genius. Knowing you, I mean, but it's
sadly, no Val Kilmer in this one.
Oh no, yeah, we neither. And spoiler alert for mine, neither of us have Top Gun then.
Yeah, I thought about Top Gun, but with my number 1 has so many quotes. He is the greatest hero that's not a hero. It's Jack Burton, man. It's Big Trouble Little China.
Oh, I knew you were gonna go with that. Why didn't I?
That is the perfect movie.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of people haven't seen this movie. So for the listeners out there, and for anybody who does tune in, tell them about the movie. What makes it great? Why should they watch this movie?
Well, Big Trouble Little China is a John Carpenter movie, starring, good old Kurt Russell. And he's a truck driver who's in San Francisco Chinatown, just hanging out, drinking, having a good time. And he gets embroiled in the underworld of Chinatown, and a man named Lo Pan, who needs a girl with green eyes to help him become human again and immortal. And what makes it such a good movie is Kurt Russell's character of Jack Burton he's not like the typical 80s hero, because he's pretty much in the movie the entire time, but he doesn't do anything until the end. Like his friend, it does everything, like all the fighting. And Jack Burton just talks a lot. So many good quotes, it's just, to me, it's the tip, like so much, like the wordplay is amazing in that movie. Everything works well together. The acting is great. You got Kim Cattrall when she was in her prime in the early 80s. I don't know. For me, I can watch that movie. I watched it today.
Yeah.
I was like, it's on Stars right now.
I should have known. I actually looked at that earlier today, and I was like, Derek's definitely going to put this in. But then I looked at so many other movies. It was like, yeah, it went by the wayside, and I love that movie. It's such a good movie. It's just it's enjoyable to watch. It doesn't get old, and you're right that the dialogue is fantastic. For that time period especially, it's really really well done. And then it's got a good mix of everything in there, and so it's fun to watch. And so if you haven't seen Big Trouble in Little China and you're watching, you should definitely see it. It's a fantastic movie. So number one for Derek, to Big Trouble in Little China. And so my number one, it's classic, and it's not off the cusp, and everybody loves it, and it's Back to the Future. The reason I go with Back to the Future is there's a couple different things. It's nostalgic for me. For me, it is a movie that I've watched a zillion times, but also for its time, it was, to me, a little ahead of its time in what they were talking about, and what they were doing, and how it was written, and the whole storyline. The graphics were great in it. There was a lot of good scenes as far as what they had to do to make some of that stuff happen. But Michael J. Fox, he's just so underrated nowadays, because he didn't get his full career that he could have. He could have been that long time actor. He could still be that guy who's playing parts in these movies as the older guy. But when you got Marty McFly running around, you cannot ask for somebody to play a better role than he did in that. Like he just really does a great job of becoming Marty McFly. And then of course you got Doc Brown, which again takes that movie. He has that in the movie, which takes the movie to the next level, which is needed to make a great movie like that. And obviously they made a great series, and it's one of the series that you look back at and you're like, man, they're all really good. And also I love how all of the characters in there did a great job at playing themselves in different eras, as they move back and forth between the future and the past and things like that. And so it's just a really good job of everybody really working hard in that movie. You could see the effort that they put into making that movie, and you could tell there was a ton of effort by everybody involved, at all levels of acting, whether it be a first lead, second lead, third lead, or fourth lead. And so for me, if you're going to watch one movie from the 80s, you only have one choice. It's Back to the Future. I mean, it's so good. And I couldn't leave it off. I toyed with it, at 3, at 4, at 5, and where am I going to put it? And ultimately, I had to see it that way, that this is the best movie. So that's my list. So I've got Back to the Future, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Stand By Me, Trading Places, and Die Hard. So definitely and if you're talking about, and so let's talk real quickly about movies we left off for a second, right? So we don't have to highlight them all because we'd be here all night, but right. I mean, Terminator, right? I mean, it doesn't get much better in Terminator. Lethal Weapon, like you mentioned. Yeah. You mentioned Top Gun, we got those in there. But then you got some other movies, like here's one that I really had a hard time not putting on there, was Big. When you think about Tom Hanks and Big, it's not the action adventure and some of the other things that they did in the 80s, but the role he played in that movie, and how like you really thought he was a 12-year-old, 30-year-old, and he just did such a great job. And again, it's another of those feel good, but keep you going. So that was one I had a hard time with, because I love the movie, but I think it's just a good movie. It's well written, well done. So Big was one I had a hard time with. The other one I had on my list was Nightmare on Elm Street. Craven, it's just he just did something different than when you talk about those type of movies. As much as I like Friday the 13th, I'm not gonna say it's good because it's a slasher, but as much as I like Friday the 13th, Craven did something with Nightmare on Elm Street that put you on the edge of your seat in a different way. It was a mental thriller, but it was also had that great villain in Freddy Krueger, and you're like, don't fall asleep, and like so it gives you that extra anxiety along with the killing on there. So Nightmare on Elm Street was one also I had a real hard time with leaving off.
And for me, here's one, like you had Trading Places. I have 2 Dan Aykroyd ones that I left off that it could have been on there. One is the Blues Brothers.
Yeah, I thought you'd have the Blues Brothers on there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it was tough to leave off. And the other was Ghostbusters.
Yeah. And I also had Ghostbusters, and both of those could easily be on there. Blues Brothers, I think, super underrated movie. A lot of people don't know how good that movie is. Definitely thought you'd probably have that one on there. But Ghostbusters was a tough one too to leave off, because in general, that movie is huge. So, but yeah, the list could go on all night on that. So
we haven't even got into the Brat Pack.
Right. And then so Breakfast Club, right? I think we both could easily have had that one on there. Out of all of those, I did like St. Elmo's Fire, but I think Breakfast Club was the one that you could really slide into the top 5, just because it's not just a classic, but I think they all did such a good job in that one. The story's great. You mentioned Paul Gleason earlier, does a great job in it. And so it's fun, but it's dramatic in some points, and it's relatable in a lot of points.
And the funny thing about it is Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire were a year apart.
Yeah.
And one they're in high school, one they're college graduates, and both have Emilio Estevez, Judd Nelson, and Ali Sheedy.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. It feels like a continuation, but not. It's almost like it's a part 2, but it's not. But I do like both of those. Yeah, I mean, there's so many movies. And looking at movies the other one I had trouble with was Raging Bull. Is one of my favorite early boxing movies, but really it's one of my favorite De Niro movies. And you think about Scorsese and writing that and how De Niro played it. And, it's just the reason I didn't put on there, because that's not a movie for everybody. Right. It's sometimes some parts of it are hard to watch, but it's also such a great movie. So that one was hard as well. Same. I had the same problem with Platoon, and the other one, I can't remember the name right now, but those war movies that I really love those too.
Right.
It's hard for me. Full Metal Jacket. So it's
Right.
when I love those so much, those are not where I put those top 5, because somebody's looking at me like, oh, I'll watch this top 5 movie, and they're like, what the hell, what's this guy talking about, because I love that action. I love that. I'm a war buff, and I love that part of it. But
Platoon is amazing. I love Platoon.
oh yeah, Platoon definitely I think is the best war movie in that era. But yeah, again, like I said, it's not for everybody is the problem.
Yeah, Caitlin's not gonna watch it.
Right. You're not gonna be like, hey Caitlin, we're watching top 5 Platoon tonight.
And then one to piggyback off of like a Raging Bull, but also it's kind of dark, that I was like, first I was gonna put on, and then I'm like, no, it's a little too Scarface.
Yeah, that was the second one. I was when I said there's a couple, Raging Bull and Scarface were the two that, again, just not for everybody.
Right.
Scarface, I think more people could watch Scarface than Raging Bull, to be honest with you, even though Scarface is over the top in some scenes. But again, it's just a different storyline that I think, people can relate to. It's kind of like, you've seen The Color Purple. Remember that movie? Yeah. That, again, same thing. It's like, it's a great movie, Whoopi Goldberg and Danny Glover, right? And I think, it's such a good movie. And I remember I probably saw it a handful of times when I was younger, and I just never watched it again because it was such a good movie. But again, it was just like so hard to watch. And there's just movies like that they're good. And that's what I think made the 80s so great. They just did a great job with the acting and the scripts and the stories, and it really made you feel the movie.
Yeah, there's so many movies, and that was my big criteria, was if it was today and it was on TV, am I gonna sit and continue watching it?
Yeah.
And all the ones you said are movies that if they were on TV, I'd be like, I've seen this over 1,000 times probably, but I'll watch it again.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard because there are so many, even although for me, I would probably still watch Platoon over and over again. But yeah, Raging Bull, I like it. I own it, but I'm not going to like, oh, Raging Bull's on, I'm going to go watch this now. It's a great movie, but it's not one you watch over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's again, though, some of those movies are so well done that, they really just knock you off your chair the first couple times you see them, or the first time you see them.
That's like, well, if we get to the 70s movies, the 70s has tons of great acting movies.
Yeah. Well, I think the further you go back, I think there is a little more of that you run into, where it was, not saying that acting is not an art, because I respect actors and actresses. I think they do a great job. I think, it just is a little bit less of an art than it was, over the years. And I think,
Right.
Probably between the 70s and 80s into the early 90s is where that really changed a little bit.
And like you said, it probably has a lot more to do with the writing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's probably, I honestly think that's a big problem, because there are some really great actors, some people that have been great actors for a long time. You look at the Denzels and, now unfortunately Bruce Willis, he probably won't be acting much anymore or at all. But you still have those guys that have been around for a long time, and ladies have been around for a long time as well, that do a great job, and they're great at what they do. But then you have some new people that aren't necessarily super new, but are coming in their own, like say Ryan Reynolds, really coming into his own as far as acting. And when he gets on a good movie like The Adam Project, like really shines through,
Yeah.
And so
Timothy Chalamet,
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely. So good stuff. All right. Well, that's our 80s top 5 80s movie review. If you guys are watching, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Comment about what your favorite movies are.
Yeah, that's what I really, the reason that, we do this, obviously to share some information and for us to get time to get our own views. But for you watching, I'd love to see comments. What did we miss? You know, obviously we mentioned someone on our list, but what's on your list? That way other people can see that. So definitely in the comments, if you do watch this, you know, give us a couple of your favorite 80s movies, and we'll see how that compares, or tell us how bad our picks were. You know, that's okay too. I do think there's some more room for further podcasts, and we'll continue to do some movie stuff, because this is something that I love talking about, and I'm sure that or hopefully, you know, people like to listen. So yeah, don't forget to subscribe. If you hit that notification bell, this is on a playlist, so you can watch previous podcasts as well. And then yeah, next time hopefully we do have the NBA, which, you know, we didn't get an NBA tonight, but you know, we got the NBA playoffs starting. So we got that, you know, lots of stuff still happening in the world today that we'll be talking about soon. So I appreciate everybody watching. Derek, thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you guys next time.